Good. Okay, well, welcome everybody. And I shall be chairing this initially, but Frank, when he arrives, will take over the chair from me. My name's Steve Cushion. I'm on the Executive Committee of Caribbean Labour Solidarity. Luke, our chair, is giving evidence at a tribunal today about violence against black people in Britain. So I think we'll excuse him from that. It's our great honour today to have the Cuban ambassador to speak to us, and Her Excellency Ismara Mercedes Vargas will talk to us about the attack on the Cuban medical missions, which has been an important part of many people's lives in the Caribbean and elsewhere. And I think this is something that is dear to the heart of Caribbean Labour Solidarity to defend these. So if I could move straight away to the Cuban ambassador, please, the floor is yours.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, friends. Thank you, Steve. And it's a pleasure to join the group, this amazing group. And actually, the honor is ours to be able to get together and to speak about an issue that it's very important for Cuba. And as we speak, we value your commitment even more, especially on a Sunday, which we all know it's family day. So considering that you are taking your time and devoting your time to Cuba means the world to us. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you to all of you. And as I said, it's a very important discussion. And today it's important to stand together in defense of Cuba's international medical missions. My gratitude goes to especially Caribbean Labor Solidarity for organizing this event and for your steadfast commitment to justice, cooperation, and the fundamental right to health care. As you know, for over 6 decades, Cuba has placed solidarity at the heart of its foreign policy. Our International Medical Brigade, Henry Reeve contingent, have provided health care to some of the most vulnerable populations across the world. From Latin America and the Caribbean to Africa and Asia, even in Europe, Cuban doctors and health professionals have responded to natural disasters, epidemics, and everyday healthcare challenges. And they have been able to express one of the most important principles, one of the pillars of the Cuban revolutions, the revolution, which, as you know, it's internationalism and humanity. Yet today, these very principles are under attack. And this is the reason why we stand together. The recent statements by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio regarding Cuba's medical cooperation programs are not only dishonest, but also an insult to the thousands of Cuban doctors who have dedicated their lives to saving others. In his relentless obsession with harming Cuba, Rubio arrived in Jamaica, his first stop on a Caribbean tour, repeating his usual falsehoods, describing Cuban medical brigades as human trafficking, and calling for visas to be revoked is truly an insult to all of us. But that tired narrative no longer holds weight, as you have seen. the response from Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness was swift and blunt. Standing beside Marco Rubio at a joint press conference, he made it clear that Cuban doctors have been invaluable to his country, filling gaps in healthcare system, and that their presence is fully in line with international cooperation agreements. Similarly, in that same tour, Jamaica's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Camina Johnson, reaffirmed that Cuba's medical collaboration is legitimate and in no way constitutes human trafficking. Those two statements were very important and very clear. The backlash against this policy has been swift and widespread. In its editorial, Let Cuban Doctors Be, Jamaica's The Gleaner newspaper criticized Washington's stance, highlighting that its effect would not only be felt in Cuba, but also among the world's poorest populations in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, many of whom depend on Cuban medical assistance, as you know. As the newspaper pointed out, Washington's policy could even lead to unintended consequences, including an increase in illegal migration to the United States, something that the Trump administration claims to oppose. Rubio's claim that Cuba engages in human trafficking is an outright fabrication. We all know that. He even dares to compare Cuban medical personnel to slaves. The US has consistently sought to demonize our medical cooperation, falsely accusing Cuba of human trafficking and forced labor. But we all know the truth. We know that this rhetoric is simply another excuse to tighten the blockade against Cuba. The real objective is to undermine Cuba's international reputation and cut off vital revenue from its medical services. The impact of these policies is far-reaching. In the Caribbean, where Cuban doctors have long played a vital role in national healthcare systems, these restrictions pose a direct threat to the health and well-being of millions. This latest attack on Cuba is part of a broader aggressive strategy. For decades, Cuban medical professionals have served in countries across the globe, treating over 2.3 billion patients and saving more than 12 million lives. Now, by threatening to revoke visas from foreign officials who work with Cuban doctors, the US aims to sabotage these medical missions and deprive Cuba of a crucial source of income during a time of economic hardship. And the economic hardship comes precisely because of the imposition of the US blockade for more than 6 decades now. This is not the first time, unfortunately, that Rubio has waged war against Cuba's medical missions. Nearly 4 years ago, he co-sponsored the so-called Combating Trafficking of Cuban Doctors Act, absurdly alleging that these humanitarian efforts were a coercive trap. He claimed that Cuban medical staff were subjected to deplorable conditions, document confiscations, and unfair compensation. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ivan Gil also weighed in, noting that Rubio is incapable of looking into the eyes of the millions of men and women whose lives have been saved by the selflessness of thousands of Cuban doctors. Only raging envy and extreme hatred could drive someone to attack a mission rooted in love and solidarity, he said. Caribbean community, CARICOM, leaders have firmly defended Cuba's medical assistance, declaring it completely legal and in line with national laws. Countries like Guyana, Belize, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, Barbados, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines have warned that without Cuban healthcare workers, their health systems would collapse. In response to Washington's threats, Caribbean leaders have reaffirmed their sovereign right to establish partnerships with whomever they choose. St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves made his stance clear. He would rather lose his US visa than allow 60 poor, hardworking people to die for lack of medical care. Despite these attacks, Cuba remains unwavering in its commitment to international medical cooperation, and we want you to know that. We will not be intimidated, nor will we abandon our principles. Our doctors will continue to serve where they are needed, and Cuba will continue to stand firm in its solidarity with our Caribbean brothers and sisters. The world is not blind, not anymore. People can tell the difference between truth and deception. Cuba's medical cooperation programs align with UN South-South cooperation frameworks and bear none of the hallmarks of human trafficking or exploitation. We call then on all progressive forces, trade unions, solidarity movements, and governments in the Caribbean and beyond to reject these coercive measures. We urge the international community to speak out against this new form of economic blackmail and to reaffirm the sovereign right of nations to freely engage in medical cooperation without external interference. Furthermore, we reiterate our demand for the immediate lifting of the criminal blockade against Cuba and for Cuba's removal from the US State Department list of state sponsors of terrorism, which, as you know, is baseless. These unjust policies continue to cause immense suffering to our people and hinder Cuba's ability to engage with the world on equal terms. Since the Trump administration returned to the White House, this is just one of 7 aggressive measures imposed against Cuba in little more than a month. Just hours after taking office on January 20th, the new administration reinstated Cuba on the so-called US state sponsor of terrorism list, reversing Joe Biden's decision to remove it just before leaving office. This move has significantly worsened the impact of the blockade by discouraging banks and international institutions from working with Cuba for fear to the US coercive measures. Following that, Washington reimposed restrictions on Cuban entities, reinstated Title III of the Helms-Burton Act, and suspended transactions with Orbit SA, which directly affects thousands of Cuban families reliant on remittances for essential goods. Other hostile actions include halting humanitarian parole programs, suspending family reunification, and revoking visas for cultural and academic exchanges. Trump's administration has even labeled Cuba an adversary state, grouping it with Venezuela, Iran, Russia, and China, tightening restrictions on access to US technology. This latest US attack comes after Rubio announced new visa restrictions targeting Cuban government officials and anyone worldwide deemed complicit, as they say, in the country's medical cooperation programs. According to the State Department, these restrictions apply not only to current and former Cuban officials, but also to their immediate family members, which is an attempt at intimidation that reeks of political persecution. Dear friends, solidarity has always been a cornerstone of our struggle, and today we call on you to raise your voices in defense of Cuban medical professionals. Let us continue to resist imperialist aggression with unity, strength, and determination. Together, we will overcome these challenges and ensure that the legacy of Cuba's international medical missions endures. Cuba, a small island nation in the Caribbean, will continue to stand in solidarity with the oppressed and in defense of the right to health for all. As our historic leader Fidel Castro once said, the future must be a future of men of science, men of thought, and men of ideas, where solidarity and brotherhood prevail. Thank you so much for your unwavering support.
Thank you very much indeed. That's yes, for that excellent presentation of the situation, which added in many ways to a previous discussion we had a week or so ago, where a month or so ago rather, where our own comrade Emily Morris, who was just back from Cuba, had reported on the situation there and on the way in which the sanctions have deteriorated the lives of ordinary Cuban people, and that's that is very So we see this from all sides now. Thank you again, Ambassador, and I'll now throw the floor open to contributions from the floor. I understand, Ambassador, that you have to leave at about 1:45, I was told. So, but we can carry on talking after that. But make sure that before you go, you demand the last word, because that's the speaker's always right. Okay, who wants to make a contribution? We'd be particularly interested in anyone from the Caribbean who has an immediate experience or views on this matter.
Well, Steve, I guess you know that I'm here also to make a presentation.
Right.
So I don't know if now it's a good time to do it or later. And this had to do with a letter which was drafted by Caribbean citizens and Caribbean people living in the diaspora. And it was sent to the Secretary General of CARICOM. And we asked her, Dr. Carla Barnett, to send the letter on to all the CARICOM heads of state. So I don't know if I should do that now or later.
Let us just see if anyone has any direct questions to the ambassador, seeing as she has another appointment this afternoon. I see, and then we'll come to you, Danuta, if that's all right with you. So first of all, I see Stephen and Roberta. So if you could both make your questions or whatever, and then we can go back to the ambassador. So Stephen first. Stephen Howard.
Ladies first. Ladies first.
Let me intervene. Stephen is like my grandfather's generation, I think, when it comes to those things. I wanted to first thank the Cuban people through the ambassador. At the time, I was living in Guyana, and my family was the immediate beneficiary of Cuban doctors. And I must say the Cuban doctors did not act like they wanted to run away to some other country, you know, in the way in which someone who's being held against their will or being sent someplace against their will would take advantage of that opportunity to run. Not only were they doctors, they were neighbors, they lived and partied and everything else among us, and were free to come and go. But they were solidarity workers as well as medical doctors. And I really want to thank the people of Cuba for sharing their doctors with us. I wanted to say also, I'm sorry, it's not a question, but just a statement. And I think this is along the lines of what Stephen put into the text, into the chat, that this is also within the context of a current administration in the United States that is not concerned with healthcare. You know, Rubio could have said, look, don't bring the Cuban doctors here anymore. We'll send you United States doctors and other medical workers, but he didn't do that. It's happening at a time when the United States is ending medical assistance to other countries of the world, as well as destroying the healthcare of people within the United States. So it's also within a context of you know, a total lack of concern for healthcare, coupled with the continued attacks on Cuba and the people of Cuba. So thank you. Also, let me mention quickly, my middle name is Mercedes, so I feel a special connection with the ambassador.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Roberta. Stephen Howard?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ambassador, let me say, I made some enemies with some Cuban rightist folks going back about 30 years ago because I was praising the wonderful work that that was done by the Cubans when it comes to the liberation of the African continent, the role that they played with, you know, sending medical assistance throughout the Caribbean. I am from Trinidad and Tobago, and you know, we even had, especially during COVID, I'm living in Massachusetts in the US right now. During COVID, Cuban doctors and nurses came down to especially Trinidad and Tobago to provide training to deal with the whole COVID thing. And finally, I find it interesting that Cuban is so stigmatized when part of the reason for the invasion of Grenada, one of the first things that they did was bring the US students who were studying under Cuban doctors in Grenada at that time. Yet they still, you know, this supposed to be this pariah. And I really appreciate your comments. It's very good information. And thank you to you and your nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Right, we'll Dr. Valia Rodriguez, and then we'll go back to the ambassador. So, Valia, you'll have to unmute. Is that possible?
If you tap to the right of the three little dots, the menu will come up and you can unmute yourself.
Right. So we can come back
Sorry,
to you,
can you hear me now?
Oh, yep, we've got you. Carry on.
Sorry. It's a pleasure for me to welcome, to say hello to my ambassador. I live in England. I am a Cuban doctor. I live in England, but currently I am in Cuba. So I don't know how my connection is going to be. I am visiting my family. I wanted to speak as a Cuban doctor. And I want to say that my colleagues, all, they are very proud, but I cannot say all, but the majority are very proud to go in collaborations and missions everywhere in the world. Beyond the economical retributions that the missions could have or the collaboration could have for the doctors that could undoubtedly easy the economical situation that they face here in Cuba, that is many hardships. They are very proud to go and to help, and they come with many histories and with a lot of encouragement to continue working. I want to say that the governments in all those countries, they provide accommodation, transport, medical coverage, and they cover also the nourishment, the food. So therefore, the money that they receive, even when it's true that it's not the total what the government gives to the state, covers more than what they actually they need, because the essential expenses are already covered by all those governments. And I also want to add that is a sovereign light about forced labor and a modern slavery that doesn't classify it at all. It's just a narrative to attack, as the ambassador say, the Cuban government. And beyond that, Marco Rubio or the Trump administration, they don't care at all about the Cuban people, even less the Cuban doctors. If that were the case, the blockade were not there in place. If they really care about which is the situation of the Cuban people and the freedom of the Cuban doctors. And beyond that, I also want to add that while Cuba is not in the list of countries with modern slavery, in the list of the watch of modern slavery, there is an association that studied that. United States it is. So if it wants to talk about modern slavery or forced labor, it should look inside his own house. So I only want to add that. And thank you very much for the support to our country and the support of the Cuban people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valia. Right, given that the ambassador has to leave us shortly, I'm going to ask her to reply to those so that she can make sure that she said everything she needs to say, and then we'll come to Paul, Amo, and Joseph. So, ambassador, if you'd like to say something to sum up or whatever, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And it's really pleasant to hear your comments and in general, the support for Cuba. And of course, it was a very nice surprise to have Dr. Valia from Cuba also joining the group. I have to say that she is particularly enthusiastic here in England, and somebody who from Birmingham has been pivotal to spread out the word about Cuba. And she herself is a testament of how Cuban professionals continue to be loyal to their principles wherever they are. So we are very proud of our professionals, and we are very happy to have Valia here with us as well. It's very flattering when we represent a small island nation, and as I said, a nation for which solidarity, respect, and cooperation are the base of foreign policy and, in general terms, of our projection in life. And regarding the comments put forward, I should also add that something that it was said along the lines, but for us, this medical cooperation is more than giving. It's also about receiving. Our medical doctors come back stronger from those countries. They, as you know, go to, even in some cases, to remote areas, and they are in touch with populations who have not been in the position to receive medical assistance for a while, because they live in very remote areas. However, all of them, when they come back, they say, I feel I'm a different professional. I'm stronger, I'm more devoted to my profession. I feel I have to continue doing this because it's important for my country, and it's important for all the brothers and sisters. We are extending a hand. When we go to the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, Latin America, you name it, Cuban professionals are not there thinking that they are the best of the best. They are there with a very humble opinion, hands-on, and ready to work whenever and wherever needed. That's why I believe because of the reputation, the good reputation that has been there for us in those countries, for the Cuban doctors, I believe that's the main reason for the US administration, and in particular Marco Rubio, to target these actions. Because they do know that Cuban professionals are loved, are respected, and the fact that even under the hardships imposed by the blockade, that Cuba continues to extend a hand to all the sister nations in need. So we should all think about this in detail. And it's more than the economic warfare. In my humble opinion, this is about the lack of decency by US politicians these days. It's not enough imposing a cruel blockade. It's not enough targeting Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism when every single US official knows that Cuba does not belong to that list. Not to speak about the fact that that list is unilateral, and no country should follow the opinions of the US in that regard. But trying to demonize the Cuban medical cooperation, it's like too much. And that's why I was personally referring to the lack of decency, which goes beyond the blockade and the US policy and the history and the reluctance by the US government to accept that Cuba is a sovereign and independent country. And this is precisely why the reaction by Caribbean leaders is so important, because they also reaffirm that they represent sovereign, independent countries, that they are supposed, and their people are the ones to decide who is in charge, not the US government, by no means. So it's been a long time, and people really get tired of trying to be having that imposition and being under pressure. So in that sense, I want to reiterate our gratitude to all the participants with us, the one I was able to listen to, and the ones who will take the floor in a few minutes. Also to Dr. Valia from Havana, and all of you, Caribbean Labor Solidarity, for organizing the event. And my colleague Pablo will stay here with you. So thank you so much, and let's continue working together.
Thank you very much. It's much appreciated. It's been an honor to have you, and we will do whatever we can. Caribbean Labour Solidarity always remembers that when the earthquake hit Haiti, there was a lot of hand wringing, but there were Cuban doctors already on the ground, ready to help from the beginning, and that was so important to our comrades in Haiti. So thank you very much. We'll let you go now, and thank you.
Thank you for your understanding as well.
I propose that we listen to, there's Paul, there's Emma, and there's Joseph. If you could make your points now, and then we will hear Danuta speak about her the international letter that she that she's here to speak about. So Paul first, then Emma, then Joseph. Paul, please.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I did want to say thank you to the ambassador for all the help they give us here in Jamaica. Of course, it's not just doctors that come from Cuba, but a lot of our doctors in Jamaica trained in Cuba. And not only are doctors trained in Cuba, but we also have Cuban-built schools here in Jamaica, and Cuban teachers. So the amount of help we get is enormous. Now I was just looking up some figures, the scale of the medical missions in the world. 103 countries that Cuba assists, 19,000 medical staff, 30,000 medical staff, 19,000 doctors. The scale of it is enormous. But I really wanted to make just a comment on what the ambassador said with reference to Andrew Holness, the Prime Minister here in Jamaica. As you probably all know, that Rubio's first stop was in Jamaica, because I think our Prime Minister Holness is seen as a potential more of a friend to the USA than perhaps some other leaders in the Caribbean. And we were a little bit worried that he was going to speak to Andrew Holness and try and pick him off and divide and rule the Caribbean. So we were very pleased that Holness actually came out and said what he did. Basically, he said, load of rubbish. You know, you need to look, well, he didn't say this, but I'm saying this, of course, you need to look inside. I think somebody else said it already, look inside America. Some of our farm workers that go to America from Jamaica are not exactly treated very well. So Holness basically said that, of course, the idea of slavery of Cuban medical staff here is a load of rubbish. In fact, that turned out to be quite a compliment. He didn't actually say he would forego his visa, but what he actually said was perhaps a very good compliment for the leaders who said they would forego their visas, because he really basically dismissed the whole thing. Yeah, so that's it. And so thanks very much for the ambassador, even though she's left. Okay, take care.
Thanks very much, Paul. Emma?
Yes, I also wanted to commend the ambassador and the Cuban people for their selfless sacrifices and solidarity to oppressed people around the world in terms of their commitment to, people's health. I have visited Cuba 3 times in the last 20 years, and it's a place that I love dearly for its people, its warmth, its history, its commitment. And I was on the receiving end on one of my trips to excellent medical care from a Cuban doctor or doctors, because I was bitten by a dog and had to have medical treatment to prevent rabies. And that was a testament to absolutely fantastic care. So I wanted to, to inform the ambassador that, that I've been in receipt of this treatment, medical care, and also just as I've said, that the warmth of the Cuban people and curiosity. People would ask me, where are you from? ¿De dónde eres? And I would say, Inglaterra. And people would say, in sheer surprise, Los Negros in Inglaterra, that there are Black people in England. And that would often spark discussion, debate, and a real, sincere curiosity, intellectual curiosity in terms of African descended people elsewhere. But the question I really wanted to ask the ambassador was, what can we do to continue to support Cuba on this particular issue? It's all very well and important for leaders, CARICOM leaders and African leaders to stand in solidarity, but what can ordinary people do on the ground to mobilize support? That was my question that I wanted to put to the ambassador. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Emma. Caribbean Labour Solidarity is in contact with the Cuban Embassy, and we've made it quite clear that anything they want us to do, we shall do. And that they can, we're also in contact with the Cuba Solidarity Campaign and so on. So I think that you will be hearing from us via the email with things to do. But the main thing, it seems to me, at the minute, is that what we can do is spread the word everywhere amongst ordinary people about what a monstrosity the sanctions in general are, the blockade, as they call it, on Cuba, and what suffering it's causing, and the complete hypocrisy of the United States government in their attitude. Right, Joseph.
Yeah, good afternoon, Steve. Good evening, wherever people are. First of all, I want to thank the ambassador on behalf, and also and the people of Cuba for their outstanding solidarity contribution worldwide. But I also want to say that we have to look at this in the context of other grander plans. For instance, how Petrocaribe project by Venezuela was destroyed. Anything to help to accelerate the independence and the sustainability of the region is being attacked. So this is just one of the latter part. As one who has benefited from Cuba's medical assistance, particularly in the field of dental. I've had excellent service from the Cuban dental people in Grenada. I'm calling from Grenada. The ambassador may not know. And it has been very, I've always, and I would always stand in solidarity with Cuba, because Cuba does much more than we could imagine with the difficulty they have. I just want to ask one kind of question that I don't know if it might be appropriate. In the past, the United States and others used to try to lure athletes to defect and so on, and then they would celebrate that soon after if there were 1 or 2 Cuban athletes that celebrate. But I have never heard about Cuban doctors deflecting. Can she say, is there any defection or so, and to what extent is there? Because there may be, if notwithstanding that the majority of people, of doctors, would be glad to support the country. Has there been any defection? throughout the program?
Right. The ambassador has left us now for another meeting, but we will make it. I'll make inquiries. I'll make inquiries about that. To the best of my knowledge, it's not been. There will undoubtedly have been one or two, but I think that's it's negligible compared with the 30,000 of which Paul spoke, and I think that's but we'll make inquiries and I'll let you know. Right now. And when we're talking
sorry,
about
Steve, Bentley's hand keep going up and down. I don't know if he wants to come in.
Bentley's not on the Bentley.
He seemed to have disappeared. Okay. Yes, he's there.
Can I suggest that we hear from Danuta and then we hear from Bentley? Yeah. Mm-hmm. We did say that Danuta could speak at this stage, if you would care to, and then we'll bring you in, Bentley.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve, and good morning to everyone on this Zoom meeting. It was wonderful to hear the Cuban ambassador speak. And some of what she said is also going to be reflected in what I'm going to present, which is about a letter. And this was a solidarity action, a letter. It was an open letter to CARICOM on this US visa restriction policy on government officials whose countries engage Cuban medical professionals, because this is how it was first presented, I assume, to put as much pressure as possible on Caribbean leaders. So they were saying if, Caribbean leaders continued with the program of the Cuban medical professionals in their countries, they would strip them of visas to United States of America, and not only them, but their immediate families. So this is how it was actually presented at first. So our letter was emailed to Dr. Carla Barnett, Secretary General of CARICOM, on March 24th of this year, and hand-delivered on the 25th. The letter had attached 183 Caribbean citizens' names and members of the diaspora. And these 183 were collected in just about 4 days. Afterwards, a few other names were attached, but we wanted to make sure that the letter got out to the CARICOM Secretary General, to heads of governments of the Caribbean, and also to be in newspapers. That's why it's an open letter, in the media. So everyone could see it, including, we hoped, the US officials and Rubio, Secretary of State. We asked in the cover letter to CARICOM Secretary General that would be forwarded to the CARICOM heads of government. And we knew of Rubio's plan to visit some CARICOM countries and his plan to raise the issue of Cuban medical workers. And we wanted to make sure that the voices of the Caribbean and the diaspora on this issue would be heard. We also felt that it would solidify and let Caribbean heads of government know that the people of the Caribbean and civil society in the Caribbean and in the diaspora, were in support, right, of their statements, in solidarity with the Cuban medical workers who were working in their countries. The letter referred to the US Department of State's Secretary of State Mario Rubio's February 25th expansion of the existing Cuban-related visa restriction policy applying to current or former Cuban government officials. This expansion incorporated and targeted foreign government officials and their immediate families who were believed to be responsible for or involved in the Cuban labor export program, because this was the terms used by the US. According to the US, Cuba's overseas medical missions, labor export programs, enrich the Cuban government, and countries involved were described as complicit in the exploitation, forced labor, and human trafficking of Cuban workers. Our letters endorse the responses to the US Department of State by current Caribbean leaders, including Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mayor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, all who deemed the US visa restriction policy as a threat to the sovereignty of Caribbean states. And in fact, quite a few of the Caribbean states publicly said, that's okay. If this means that if we don't go ahead with what you want, you keep our visa, that is fine. We don't need it, and we will not be forced into taking positions against Cuban medical workers based on a visa to the United States of America. The Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines stated that ending such programs would jeopardize the lives of 60 nationals who were currently part of a Cuban-run hemodialysis program to treat kidney failure. And if that program stopped, these people would die, and he was not prepared to have the deaths of 60 people from St. Vincent on his hands. Several Caribbean leaders repudiated accusations that Caribbean countries were complicit in human trafficking. Dickon Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada, described the arrangement with the government of Cuba as a legitimate partnership. Gaston Browne, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, defended the Cuban doctors and nurses as core to the country's delivery of health services, while Guyana's President, Dr. Irfan Ali, confirmed that the government ensures that Cuban workers' contracts and terms of employment align with international labor laws and standards. The Jamaican Foreign Minister, Kamina Johnson-Smith, said that the presence of Cuban health professionals was important to the Jamaican healthcare system, pointing to 400 doctors, nurses, and medical technicians currently working in the country. And in a social media post, Bahamian Foreign Minister Fred Mitchell pointed out that his government follows all international best practices in the recruitment of labor. So, many times in the Caribbean, we have a lot of problems with some of the policies and so on of the Caribbean leaders, of our CARICOM leaders in this instance. But I must say, on this matter, they stood firm. And, this was not the first time the Caribbean leaders have had to defend the work of the Cuban medical brigades in the face of US criticism. In June 2020, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, issued a statement expressing its deep appreciation to the Republic of Cuba for the medical support provided to 6 member countries of the OECS to assist with efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19 pandemic in the OECS and in the wider Caribbean region also. The OECS was responding to a bill introduced by a US Republican senator which classified this assistance from Cuba as human trafficking and sought to extend punitive measures against countries accepting this assistance. So, the Caribbean has been under threat of this for quite a time. The letter reminded that historical and current ties between CARICOM countries and Cuba have been long and cordial. In 1972, diplomatic relations were established between Cuba and Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaica. In 202, commercial and economic agreements were signed between Cuba and CARICOM countries, and by 2017, preferential access to a range of products between the countries of the Caribbean and Cuba were agreed upon. Over this period, and areas of cooperation between CARICOM countries have remained strong in trade, investments, health, and agriculture. CARICOM has also been in the forefront in consistently expressing solidarity with Cuba and calling for an end to the U.S. embargo on Cuba and the lifting of crippling U.S. sanctions. The 183 persons who signed onto this open letter and Caribbean Labor Solidarity Group also signed, Luke signed on behalf of you all, categorically rejected these accusations as misrepresentations of Cuba labor exploitation, forced labor, and human trafficking in the Caribbean in relation to Cuban medical personnel and medical services. We stood in solidarity with our sister nation, Cuba, and its selfless and heroic medical professionals who have saved lives, enhanced medical services, and delivered expert medical care to countless Caribbean peoples. The letter ended with calling on CARICOM to collectively, firmly reject and repudiate the idea that the governments of the regions are involved in human trafficking through the Cuban medical missions, defend the inalienable right of the peoples of the Caribbean to access public health care delivered through the excellent work of the Cuban medical teams, firmly defend the self-evident right of member states to determine for themselves which forms of regional cooperation can best meet the needs of the people of the region. And I'd like to speak a bit about Guyana, and Roberta mentioned this because, you know, Guyana is one of the countries in the Caribbean which has benefited greatly from Cuban medical professionals. And, you know, many years ago, when there were so few doctors available in Guyana, especially in remote and hinterland and indigenous communities, Cuban doctors who went there were the first doctors that the people of those communities had ever had there to help treat them. In 2015, according to government data, 558 Guyanese doctors received training in Cuba, and the present number of Cuban-trained Guyanese doctors would have also increased, you know, quite a bit since then. And this is a little update. So on March 25th, Prime Minister Holness of Jamaica, at the face-to-face meeting with Marco Rubio, defended Cuban medical workers in Jamaica, saying that they were incredibly helpful and assured that physicians and nurses were protected by Jamaican labor laws. And Holness did not back down on the threats and misinformation from the US about forced labor and human trafficking, saying that any characterization of the program by others would not be applicable to Jamaica. This strong response from Jamaica forced Rubio to concede that every country operates the program differently, and obviously, because of our relationship with Jamaica, we're going to engage with them and talk about it further and have a better understanding. And then went on to say, perhaps none of this applies in the way it's handled here, referring to Jamaica. And according to The Economist, there are as many as 1,500 Cuban doctors working in the Caribbean. So that is, yeah, my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danuta. That was it's good that we could have someone speaking from both from Cuba on the sort of delivery end, and someone from the Caribbean on the receiving end, and both singing off the same hymn sheet basically. So that was very good. What I shall do is I'll circulate that open letter to our whole mailing list and put it on the CLS website, so that because I think it's in part so that people who are writing letters, making campaigns, whatever, in whatever country they happen to be, can have, you know, sort of a template, if you will, that could be very useful for writing to members of parliament or whatever people choose to do in support of this. So thank you.
I just want to say this also. I mean, it was remarkable to us that in such a short period of time, so many Caribbean people signed on to this letter, you know, and it showed that the appreciation of Caribbean people, you know, for Cuba's.
It was actually quite an impressive list, I thought. So well done for everyone who was involved in organising that. Right, thank you. Now, Bentley, you've been very patient, so unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you. Carry on, Bentley.
Greetings, comrades. Just to say that I am very, very pleased, excitedly pleased for this meeting and the response to the American government's intrusion into Caribbean affairs, and in particular, the threat that they issued regarding people who continue to support the Cuban medical assistance scheme. Something that I'm so proud of, because in Jamaica, I go down to the rural area, the village, the bush, and I can tell you the big excitement that is there for cataract removal and for all other medicinal needs when those medics arrive. So it is a godsend, absolutely and completely. Second point I want to make is that the People's National Party and its affiliate, the People's National Party UK, of which I am an executive member, committee member, we anxiously awaited Rubio's arrival in Jamaica, and the Prime Minister, Holness, stood his ground very well, but he couldn't do anything else, couldn't tell it other than that, because he was aware of the widespread condemnation awaiting him if he'd ever make any kind of concession to Rubio's demand. So the People's National Party anxiously put us on our guard that we must be ready with the protest. And that is a wonderful thing. So congratulations on conducting this wonderful meeting, my brothers and my sisters and my comrades.
Thank you very much, Bentley. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishes to make a contribution? Please put your hand up. I don't always see people who just wave their hand, but if you could use the reaction button on the bottom row, if you have anything to say, that would be useful. Is there anyone? Any further contributions?
Yeah.
Frank?
Yeah. I think that we've been seeing the whole, to me, it's like an exercise in white privilege, basically, what's happening from the Trump's government. They've gone around, they are telling us who receive the Cuban doctors and the benefits from the Cubans of training our doctors, our nurses, and assisting us in these pandemics, disasters, because Cuban doctors are there with the disasters. They're telling us what's happening is a lie. But where are the American doctors when we have these pandemics or these, disasters, there's no American doctors there to help. And as someone mentioned, he didn't say we are going to replace them with American doctors. It's the same thing with it's an ivory tower. They sit down in their ivory tower and say what is happening throughout the world. We're going to stop aid. We're going to, it's just, I can't understand that the world is in such a dangerous position right now with this idiot at the control. It's, we are so close to disaster. It's frightening. Anyway, I think I'm glad that the Caribbean leaders, as with the African leaders, they all stood their ground and say, well, this is not on. We are quite happy with what we've got, and I've liked the way they stood. In fact, when Motley said that she's willing to give up her visa, it took it to a different level, because it's what our leaders should be doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Frank. That's well put. So I see Roberta and then Joseph. So Roberta, please.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that one of the things I've noticed as people make comments is that the Cuban doctors and nurses, etc., they never ask a patient, what party are you supporting? And I'm glad to see that the people of the Caribbean, even those who otherwise may have objections to the Cuban government, are recognizing the importance of the Cuban medical personnel and are speaking up, so that it's not a partisan issue in that sense. I mean, we would like to see the solidarity with Cuba broaden, but at the same time, I think it's important to take notice of the fact that irrespective of the political leanings of let's say, the Prime Minister of Jamaica or some of the other heads of state, that they recognize how significant the Cuban contribution to the health of their populations is. So I just wanted to mention that. I certainly was never asked what party I was supporting when I was assisted by Cuban medical personnel. It was never a question raised.
Very important point, that, Roberta. Joseph?
Unmute, Joseph.
Unmute me.
Yeah, you're fine. We can hear you now. Oh, no,
you've muted again.
You've silenced yourself again. Now,
okay.
Speak now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. I think what this shows that there's an appetite for greater collaboration and further conversation on the Cuban issue. I think one of the things that probably maybe influenced the behavior of the leaders was that some of us began very immediately raising that as an issue, because Caribbean countries tend to take time and they try to look at how they should go and so on. But I think because there are some of us who immediately start to say, no, you can't do Cuba that. And so that it was very difficult for them later on to take a different course. I mean, we know people like Holness and Mia, I mean, they play double games, but it was good that they at least came out and said, what they would prefer. I think it would have been good if one of the Caribbean leaders at a demonstration said, look, your visa, I don't need your visa, and stick to it. But as I said earlier, we need to make the connection with how the attempt to keep the Caribbean and the world at large in a dependent and a dependent mode, where that we always have to look to the Godfather or whoever for salvation. A doctor from the United States, Dr. Vera Bowles, an African-American doctor, told an audience that I organized last year that folks should stop going to the US thinking that they can get medical attention there because they're not coming back alive in the Caribbean, which is true. Many people leave, spend a lot of money to go to the US, especially people with cancer and so on, only to come back in a coffin. So, but when folks go to Cuba or get treatment from Cuba, I mean, it's almost a given that they would live. It would be good if Cuba could be the grip on Cuba could be loosened, so that, I mean, much more benefits to come to the Caribbean. So I think, you know, I'm happy for this conversation and the tone. You know, indeed, it's the first time I'm seeing that the majority of people in the Caribbean, including political parties, are on the same side. And we have to be on the same side in history. We can't allow this thing to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think that we can use this opportunity to, you know, when clearly they have gone too far, even by their own standards, to actually start to use this as a pushback against US imperialism in general and this government in particular. Right, but enough of me. Hector.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Just want to make a few brief points. As a UK-based trade unionist, I know that people on this call from other parts of the world. So just wanted to basically firstly welcome the meeting today, and also say that as part of my trade union role, part of my union PCS, we're affiliated to the Cuba Solidarity Campaign, and I'm a member of the executive committee of the Cuba Solidarity Campaign in the UK. And just to say, for those who are not aware, that campaign has been running for decades, providing solidarity, and its main purpose has been to oppose the US blockade against Cuba, which is probably unique in its outrageousness, if I can put it that way. Every year, for example, at the UN, there was always a motion tabled to, you know, oppose the blockade and call for its abolition. Almost every country in the world votes in favour of that motion, with a few exceptions: the United States, Israel, and one or two others. And that just shows how across the world the blockade is absolutely opposed by almost all nations on the planet. I'll give one brief example of some of the problems that the blockade causes. People are familiar with PayPal, and one of the things with PayPal, you can buy stuff on eBay, but you can also transfer money between other PayPal users. We discussed in this incident recently where somebody by mistake put in the payment reference, they used the word Cuba in the reference. Because of that was picked up by PayPal system, and they blocked the transfer. Because PayPal was so concerned about being sanctioned by the US if they let that financial transaction, only for a few pounds, go through. And it's those sorts of things that really cause damage. So I wanted to say, I put in the chat a link to the Cuba Solidarity Campaign website for people that are interested. But just wanted to say that certainly the vast majority of the UK trade union movement, for example, are affiliated to the Cuba Solidarity Campaign. The trade union movement in this country very much supports Cuba, because we recognise the good work that Cuba does, and we recognise the right for Cuban people to determine their own future without interference from the United States. So I just want to make those few brief points if I could. So thank you very much for being allowed to do so.
Thank you very much, Hector. And I think, yes, the importance of the trade union movement in Cuba Solidarity needs to be recognised and put forward. Right, I see Stephen Howard.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Good afternoon again, everyone. Good morning in some cases. Before I ask you a question, Mr. Chair, while I was at WBI in New York, there was a young woman by the name of Sally O'Brien who had a weekly program called Cuba in Focus. And it was very educational, because you were getting perspectives on Cuba that you heard nowhere else in the media. Also, Passes for Peace was also the place that they went to get promotion on WBI when they were doing their annual pilgrimage to Cuba. But Mr. Chair, this is my question for you. How how powerful do you think the Caribbean nations would be had this blockade not been in effect, and the Caribbean nations could, say, conduct commerce, especially when it pertains to medical, throughout the Caribbean? What kind of impact do you think that would have had on the Caribbean as a whole? Thank you.
Very hard to say, but I think that undoubtedly not only would the people of Cuba be very much better off. I mean, I've visited Cuba a number of times myself, and I've got friends there who are hard up and are hard up as a result of the blockade. And I think, but an independent Cuba working with an independent Caribbean could have taken the whole region forward, broken some of the dependency on the United States and so on. And I mean, we saw that the way the Grenadian Revolution in 3-4 short years was able to make such difference to the economy of Grenada, with some help from Cuba. And so on. And so I think that such advances could have been made more generally, but perhaps that's what the United States government are afraid of. Perhaps they don't want that kind of development in the Caribbean, because they'd rather keep people subservient. It's who knows what could or would or should have happened, but I think that it's quite clear as far as the Caribbean is concerned, this has been detrimental, doing considerably detriment. Right, anyone else before we close? Anyone else want to say anything? Right, in which case,
I just Steve,
yes,
just wanted to say that I know the focus quite rightly is on the Cuban medical missions to the Caribbean, etc. But Guyana, like the world, is trying to come to terms, and in some cases reeling with US policies on a number of issues, including tariffs, etc. And the Caribbean as such, is also being faced with tariffs, which are probably going to affect them negatively. So I don't know if this is something that maybe Caribbean Labor Solidarity Group wants to do a particular Zoom on, because it is that in the face of this, and the US presidency lasts for 5 years, even though of course Trump wants to extend it. But in the face of that, what is to be done? What is to be done? Because the rule of law, as we know it, no longer applies, really, especially from, the more developed countries. And we see this, who is a terrorist, etc., and all this unilateral kind of thing. So, and I think the more vulnerable you are, the more you depend on rule of law, you depend on human rights, a system, which can protect you against violations. So I don't know,
I think that's a good point. We will make sure that the Caribbean Labour Solidarity Executive discusses this, and basically as soon as we've got something to say on it, then we shall do so. Right, I see Paul Ward and David Horsley, and then I think we'll leave it at that. I've got a couple of announcements to make, one of which concerns David Horsley, but perhaps that's what he wants to say. We shall see. But if he doesn't say it, I shall. Right, Paul Ward, then David.
Yeah, thank you, Danuto. I was going to make the same comment that I'm actually on the CLS executive, so I really hope the next meeting will be about the tariffs. There's been some very good articles in the Gleaner, including the local Jamaican paper, the Gleaner, including the editorial. Very critical and very useful, constructive comments about the tariffs, especially concerning the Caribbean Basin Initiative that was started off by Reagan, who wasn't exactly a progressive, but that, you know, the rule of any kind of rule-based world is now being thrown out, and the Caribbean Basin Initiative doesn't seem to apply anymore. I do hope that next meeting we do concentrate on that. We shall see.
Right, thank you very much, David. Can I say I was going to make an announcement about your Winston Pinder project, but if you want to, while you're speaking, you know more about it than me.
All right, thanks, Steve. First of all, I thought the Cuban ambassador was tremendous. She spoke so well with great feeling and illustrated the situation. Yes, the other, just to catch up, I think it was one of the speakers said, asked about what the situation might have been. And I'm just going to say briefly, there was an organization called Caribbean Labour Congress set up after the Second World War by progressives, socialists, communists, and left-wing nationalists in the Caribbean. The secretary was the great Richard Hart, one of the founders of our organization. And the idea was to create a united socialist Caribbean of all countries, not just the British territories, but alas, the Cold War came along. So there was an attempt. But no, what I'm asking, comrades, is this. Some of you might have known Winston Pinder. Winston's in his 90s now. Winston came over from Barbados in 1954, joined the Communist Party, was a close friend of both Billy Strachan and Claudia Jones. In fact, he calls both of them his mentors. He is more well known as being a really pioneer youth worker, mentoring many young people in London. Now, a colleague and I want to get together to produce a booklet celebrating the life of Winston and hopefully present it to him. So I'm asking if anybody here has memories of Winston Pinder, a remarkable person, very, very modest and humble. Please contact me, and basically I just want people to write their recollections. Don't worry about length, nothing will be altered. So thank you very much, Steve, and thank you, comrades, for letting me speak on that.
Right, thank you very much. That's a very good project, I think. And if anyone wants to get in contact with David, if you write to me through the email that you got the registration for this talk on, I'll forward whatever you say through to David, and I'll also circulate around our list this appeal. So thank you, David, for saving me the trouble of saying that. Right, I'm going to make one final announcement before we go. I'm going to share my screen. The Socialist History Society and Caribbean Labour Solidarity have jointly published a book entitled Enslaved Worker Rebellions and Revolution in the Americas to 1804, written by our old comrade Mary Turner, who she passed away 12 years ago, and this was unpublished, but we dug the draft out of an old hard drive that we found. So this is available, £5 post-free in the UK, £7 overseas. If you can either write to me through the number, through the email that we have, or if you but I shall equally circulate the details of this, and hopefully people will who are interested will place the order. Frank.
Yeah, I'd just like to give a mention of the GAC's Sunday International Session, which today is will cover Kwame Nkrumah, and it's from 1500 to 1900. It's on Zoom, and the link is 906-317-7486, and the password is SIS 001. Thank you. Global African Congress.
Yeah, so there's a Global African Congress meeting. Thank you, Frank, for reminding us of that. That'll take place this this follows this today immediately.
Yes,
please.
It is immediate, Steve, but you give them an hour at 1500 because usually the first part is just reports and that's boring stuff.
So you've got time to go and make yourself a cup of tea and a sandwich and come back for that meeting. Right. Well, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you. If Pedro is still with us, the First Secretary of the Embassy, thanks again. I will.
Steve, there's a request that you put the information on Mary's book into the chat, please, so we know where to contact.
It's on the CLS site.
I'm just going to. Right, where are we? Yeah, I should have
Sorry, but I didn't want you to log off before you.
No, I was about to. Right, how are you? Everyone in the meeting? Sorry. Paste. There you are. It's the link is on the Socialist History website, and that's now in the chat. But what I will do, if it's all right, is we've recorded this. I shall circulate the details of it to everyone who registered, and then I'll put that in it as well. So, but thank you.
Mr. Chair, before you leave,
yeah,
the gentleman who just gave the information for the upcoming Zoom, can you also make that available for us, because I wasn't able to write down the information as he was giving it out.
Right.
Thank you.
Have you got a link? Frank,
yeah,
I've got right. I've got it from
Glenroy.
Copy link address. Sorry, I know you shouldn't read things out when you're doing it. It's a sign of an exhausted mind. There we go. I've put the link. I've put the link in the chat. It's the one from me that starts USO2 web Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you've got that. Right. So we'll leave that. We'll leave the meeting open for anyone who wants to copy that now. But formally, I'm going to stop recording and thank you all very much for attending. And I thought that was a really useful meeting myself, and so it was good to hear such a positive response from people. Thank you very much.